Representative Brett Guthrie, a Republican from Kentucky, has long been a prominent voice in the healthcare debate. His interest in Medicaid, the federal state program providing health coverage to millions of low-income Americans, runs deep. Guthrie's commitment to reform stems from a belief that the program, while essential, is in dire need of an overhaul. He sees himself as a guardian of its long-term sustainability, aiming to protect it from insolvency while ensuring it serves those most in need. His history of working on healthcare issues, coupled with his position as chairs of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, places him at the heart of this contentious battle over Medicaid's future. Guthrie's vision for Medicaid is rooted in conservative principles emphasizing fiscal responsibility and personal accountability. He has consistently advocated for measures aimed at curbing costs and promoting self-sufficiency among beneficiaries. These include work requirements for able-bodied adults, increased cost-sharing provisions, and stricter eligibility criteria. While critics often frame these proposals as draconian cuts, Guthrie argues they are necessary steps to rein in spending and prevent the program from collapsing under its own weight. Guthrie's approach to Medicaid reform has evolved over the years, shaped by political realities and changing circumstances. During the Obama era, he emerged as a vocal critic of the Affordable Care Act, particularly its expansion of Medicaid eligibility. He argued that the expansion was financially unsustainable and placed an undue burden on states. However, with Republicans now in control of both Congress and the White House, Guthrie faces the daunting task of translating his reform ideas into concrete policy. The current debate over Medicaid represents a pivotal moment in Guthrie's career. He finds himself walking a political tightrope, seeking to balance the demands of his party's conservative base with the need to craft legislation that can pass muster in a divided Congress. His success or failure in this endeavor will have profound implications for the millions of Americans who rely on Medicaid for their health care. The Republican Party, long united in its desire to rein in the size and scope of government, finds itself increasingly fractured when it comes to Medicaid. This internal division poses a significant challenge for Guthrie as he attempts to steer his party's vision for Medicaid reform through the legislative process. The Republican caucus encompasses a spectrum of views on the program, ranging from those who see it as a bloated entitlement program ripe for deep cuts to those who recognize its vital role in providing a safety net for vulnerable populations. On one end of the spectrum are the fiscal hawks, primarily representing safely Republican districts who view any increase in government spending with skepticism. They argue that Medicaid has grown too large and expensive, crowding out other priorities and contributing to the nation's mounting debt. These members are pushing for substantial reductions in federal Medicaid spending, often advocating for measures such as block granting the program to states or converting it to a per capita cap system. They view such reforms as essential to restoring fiscal discipline and ensuring the long-term solvency of the program. At the other end of the spectrum are more moderate Republicans, often hailing from swing districts where Medicaid enjoys broader public support. These members are wary of deep cuts to the program, fearing they could jeopardize coverage for their constituents and spark a political backlash. They are more receptive to incremental reforms that emphasize efficiency and cost-effectiveness while preserving the program's core mission of providing health care to low-income Americans. Guthrie, tasked with bridging this divide, faces the unenviable task of crafting legislation that can appease both factions. He must navigate the competing demands of fiscal conservatives who want to see significant reductions in spending, and moderates who are concerned about the potential impact of cuts on their constituents. This balancing act requires a deft political touch and a willingness to compromise. Looming large over the debate is a staggering number $880 billion. This figure represents the amount of deficit reduction that the House Energy and Commerce Committee under Guthrie's leadership is tasked with finding over the next decade. With Medicaid consuming a significant portion of the federal budget, it has become a prime target for cuts as lawmakers grapple with the nation's fiscal challenges. The pressure to find substantial savings from the program is immense, creating a high-stakes environment where even small changes can have significant budgetary implications. The $880 billion target has become a focal point of the debate, shaping the parameters of what is considered politically feasible. It has also fueled anxieties among both lawmakers and healthcare advocates, who fear that such a large reduction in spending cannot be achieved without causing significant harm to the millions of Americans who rely on Medicaid. The sheer magnitude of the target underscores the difficult choices facing lawmakers as they seek to balance fiscal responsibility with the needs of vulnerable populations. The quest to find $880 billion in savings from Medicaid has led to intense scrutiny of the program's spending. Lawmakers and policy experts are poring over data, analyzing every aspect of the program from eligibility criteria to reimbursement rates. The goal is to identify areas where costs can be reduced without compromising access to essential healthcare services. This process has sparked heated debates about the trade-offs inherent in any attempt to rein in spending, with advocates for the poor and disabled arguing that cuts will inevitably harm those who can least afford it. The $880 billion target has also intensified the partisan divide over Medicaid. Democrats, largely united in their opposition to deep cuts, argue that the Republican effort to slash Medicaid is driven by ideology rather than sound fiscal policy. They point out that the program has a proven track record of providing affordable health care to millions of Americans and warn that cuts will have devastating consequences for families and communities across the country. The debate over the $880 billion target highlights the fundamental disagreements between the two parties about the role of government in providing a safety net for its citizens. Navigating the treacherous waters of Medicaid reform requires a delicate touch and a keen understanding of the art of the possible. Guthrie, in his draft legislation, has attempted to strike a balance between the demands of fiscal conservatives and the concerns of moderates, resulting in a package that is both ambitious and pragmatic. The proposal represents a significant departure from the more draconian cuts initially envisioned by some Republicans, reflecting a recognition that wholesale changes to the program are unlikely to garner sufficient support. One of the most significant concessions made by Guthrie is the removal of a proposal to cap federal funding for Medicaid expansion. This provision, a cornerstone of earlier Republican efforts to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, would have shifted significant financial risk to states and potentially resulted in millions of Americans losing coverage. Its removal from the current proposal signals a willingness to compromise and a recognition of the political realities facing Republicans in a closely divided Congress. In its place, Guthrie has proposed a series of more targeted reforms aimed at curbing costs and promoting personal responsibility. These include new work requirements for able-bodied adults, increased cost-sharing provisions for beneficiaries, and stricter eligibility criteria. While these measures are likely to face opposition from Democrats and some patient advocacy groups, they are seen as more palatable to moderate Republicans who are wary of large-scale cuts to the program. The draft legislation also includes provisions designed to appeal to fiscal conservatives, such as a ban on federal funding for Planned Parenthood and a reduction in funds for states that cover undocumented immigrants. These measures, while largely symbolic, are seen as important markers for Republicans who are eager to demonstrate their commitment to reducing the size and scope of government. By incorporating a mix of policy changes aimed at both controlling costs and advancing conservative priorities, Guthrie is attempting to thread the needle and assemble a coalition capable of passing meaningful Medicaid reform. Section 5. Voices of Dissent, Moderates and the Price of Compromise. The removal of the Medicaid expansion cap, while a significant concession to moderates, has not quelled all concerns within the Republican ranks. Many remain wary of the proposed changes, fearing they could disproportionately impact vulnerable populations and undermine the program's role as a safety net. These concerns are particularly acute among Republicans representing districts with large numbers of Medicaid beneficiaries, where the political costs of supporting cuts could be high. One of the most vocal critics of the proposed changes is Representative David Valadao, a California Republican representing a district with a large Hispanic population heavily reliant on Medicaid. Valadao, along with other moderate Republicans, has expressed concerns that the proposed work requirements and cost-sharing provisions could make it more difficult for low-income individuals and families to access healthcare. They argue that such measures could lead to people delaying or foregoing necessary care, ultimately driving up costs in the long run. These concerns are not limited to a handful of lawmakers. A growing chorus of healthcare providers, patient advocacy groups, and state officials have also voiced opposition to the proposed changes. They argue that the cuts would strain hospitals and clinics, lead to job losses in the healthcare sector, and ultimately harm the very people the program is designed to help. The growing chorus of dissent from these stakeholders highlights the political risks associated with Medicaid reform and the challenges facing Guthrie as he attempts to build a consensus around his proposal. The concerns of moderates are not merely political calculations. They reflect a genuine belief that the proposed changes could have unintended consequences for their constituents. These lawmakers, many of whom represent districts with significant healthcare needs, are acutely aware of the vital role Medicaid plays in their communities. They are loath to support any changes that could jeopardize access to care for their most vulnerable constituents, even if it means breaking ranks with their party. Their willingness to stand up and voice their concerns speaks to the deep divisions within the Republican Party over the future of Medicaid. Section 6. The Hawks' Cry, Fiscal Conservatism and the Pursuit of Savings. While moderates grapple with the potential human cost of Medicaid reform, fiscal hawks within the Republican Party view the debate through a different lens. For these lawmakers, the program represents a prime example of government overreach and runaway spending. They argue that its growth has become unsustainable, crowding out other priorities and contributing to the nation's ballooning deficit. Their focus is on reining in costs, even if it means making difficult choices about who receives assistance. Leading the charge for deep cuts is Representative Chip Roy of Texas, a staunch fiscal conservative who views the current proposal as insufficiently bold. Roy, along with like-minded Republicans, argues that the proposed savings are merely a drop in the bucket compared to the program's overall cost. They advocate for more transformative changes such as block granting Medicaid to states or converting it to a per capita cap system, which they believe would provide states with greater flexibility and incentivize innovation in healthcare delivery. For these lawmakers, the debate over Medicaid is not just about numbers, it is about fundamental principles. They view the program as emblematic of a larger debate about the role of government in society. They believe that the federal government has grown too large and intrusive, and that programs like Medicaid create a culture of dependency that undermines individual responsibility and self-reliance. Their goal is to shrink the size and scope of government, even if it means reducing benefits for some. The arguments put forth by fiscal hawks resonate with a segment of the Republican base that is deeply skeptical of government programs and concerned about the national debt. These voters are looking to their elected officials to take bold action to reduce spending and balance the budget. The pressure from this faction within the party has made it difficult for Republican leaders to compromise on Medicaid, even as they face resistance from moderates and external stakeholders. The clash between these competing visions for the program highlights the challenges facing Republicans as they attempt to govern in an era of deep partisan division. Section 7. Building Bridges, Guthrie's Strategy for Consensus. Faced with this complex and often contentious landscape, Representative Brett Guthrie has embarked on a delicate dance of diplomacy, seeking to build a coalition capable of passing meaningful Medicaid reform. His strategy hinges on a combination of pragmatism, persuasion, and a deep understanding of the political dynamics at play. Recognizing the need to balance competing priorities, he is engaged in a flurry of meetings and phone calls, seeking to address concerns and find common ground. Central to Guthrie's approach is a commitment to transparency and open communication. He has made himself available to members of both parties, patiently explaining the rationale behind his proposals and listening to their concerns. He has also sought to build relationships with key stakeholders outside of Congress, including governors, healthcare providers, and patient advocacy groups. By engaging in this type of outreach, Guthrie aims to build trust and understanding, even if it does not always lead to agreement. Guthrie's strategy also relies on a willingness to compromise. He recognizes that he cannot get everything he wants and that passing any legislation will require concessions from all sides. This has been evident in his willingness to abandon some of the more controversial proposals, such as the Medicaid expansion cap, in an effort to appease moderates. While this has drawn criticism from some conservatives, it has also earned him a reputation as a pragmatist who is willing to work across the aisle. Perhaps Guthrie's greatest asset in this endeavour is his deep knowledge of healthcare policy. Having served on the Energy and Commerce Committee for over a decade, he possesses a nuanced understanding of the complexities of Medicaid and the potential impact of proposed changes. This expertise has earned him credibility among his colleagues, even those who disagree with him on policy. It has also enabled him to effectively communicate the details of his proposals and counter-arguments from critics. Section 8. Beyond the Beltway, public reactions and political fallout. The battle over Medicaid is not confined to the halls of Congress. Across the country, the debate has ignited passions and sparked protests as millions of Americans anxiously await the outcome. The proposed changes have drawn fierce opposition from a broad coalition of healthcare advocates, patient groups, and individuals who rely on the program for their healthcare. Rallies and demonstrations have become commonplace in state capitals and outside congressional offices, as opponents of the cuts seek to make their voices heard. The public outcry reflects the high stakes of the debate. For the millions of Americans who rely on Medicaid, the program is not an abstract policy debate, it is a lifeline. It provides access to essential healthcare services, including doctor's visits, prescription drugs, and long-term care. For many low-income families, seniors, and individuals with disabilities, Medicaid is the only thing standing between them and financial ruin. The prospect of losing this vital safety net has generated widespread fear and anxiety. The political fallout from the Medicaid debate is likely to be significant, particularly for Republicans who are seen as the driving force behind the cuts. The program enjoys broad public support, and any effort to scale it back is likely to face stiff resistance. Democrats, sensing an opportunity to exploit the issue, have seized on the proposed cuts as evidence that Republicans are out of touch with the needs of ordinary Americans. They're already using the issue to mobilize their base and target vulnerable Republicans in the upcoming midterm elections. The public backlash against the Medicaid cuts could have far-reaching consequences for both parties. For Republicans, it threatens to further divide their already fractured coalition and could jeopardize their hold on Congress. For Democrats, it represents an opportunity to regain the trust of voters who felt left behind during the last election. The outcome of this debate will likely hinge on which party can more effectively frame the issue and connect with voters on an emotional level. Section 9. The Road Ahead, Uncertain Terrain and the Future of Medicaid. As the battle over Medicaid rages on, the path forward remains shrouded in uncertainty. Representative Brett Guthrie, facing mounting pressure from all sides, must now navigate the treacherous waters of the legislative process, where even the most meticulously crafted plans can be derailed by unforeseen obstacles. The outcome of this high-stakes game of legislative chess will have profound implications for the millions of Americans who rely on Medicaid for their health care. The first hurdle for Guthrie's proposal is securing passage in the House Energy and Commerce Committee, where he will need to rally near unanimous Republican support while fending off Democratic opposition. The committee markup, scheduled for Tuesday, is shaping up to be a crucial test of his leadership and his ability to bridge the divide within his own party. Should he succeed in committee, the bill will then face a vote before the full House of Representatives, where the outcome is far from certain. Even if Guthrie's proposal manages to clear the House, it faces an even steeper climb in the Senate, where Republicans hold a slimmer majority and the threat of a Democratic filibuster looms large. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has expressed support for Medicaid reform, but it remains unclear whether he has the votes to pass a bill that can overcome Democratic opposition. The Senate, with its tradition of deliberation and compromise, could force significant changes to the House bill, potentially reigniting tensions between the two chambers. Looming over the entire process is the specter of a presidential veto. President Trump, while expressing a desire to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, has also vowed to protect Medicaid. It remains unclear where he would ultimately come down on a bill that makes significant changes to the program, particularly if it results in millions of Americans losing coverage. The possibility of a veto adds another layer of complexity to an already fraught political calculus.